Okay, so this is going to be a complete voiceover video because of the heater that's running, and I know how annoying it is to listen to that heater, but it has been so ungod-awful cold, and Teresa's been in the shop, and she doesn't like it cold, so I had the heater running, and Timothy and Cody, they're working on that oil pan, which I needed the heater running on that to get it 100% cleaned out so that it would seal up correctly. You just got to have everything so that it seals up correctly. And you got to heat it up, get all that crap out of it. You see Timothy going with his wire brush. He's wire brushing on the outside and the inside because I will be painting this thing. I talked to my dad about painting it professionally or whatever, and I don't really want to pay somebody to paint it. And he's like, well, why in the hell would you have somebody paint it? I've seen you paint. You do just fine. So you're going to see me paint. The problem with me painting is I hate it. I hate painting. So anyway, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing here because this happened like 2 weeks ago. And I'm just kind of watching what I'm doing. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm putting on the cover for the camshaft. So you kind of gotta put the little bolts in and tighten them down. There's a cork I think it was cork. This might have been just a regular gasket, but I used a gasket adhesion spray that came from Permatex, not the copper stuff, but it's red, and that works really well. I mean, that will seal the gasket right up, and you can see that I'm tightening them down. I've got all the ventilator and everything else in there, and I often wondered because John Deere stopped using the ventilator, the crankcase ventilator, shortly after the 1020 series. I don't think the 4320 has it. If it does, it's forced in from the turbocharger, and there's no actual ventilator pump, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember. It's been a while since I looked at it, but I don't know. I don't believe there is one, but I'll have to look. I definitely will have to look. It might be forced ventilation from the turbocharger, but anyway, a lot of guys were saying, oh, well, the reason that John Deere stopped using the ventilator was because of the causing it to gunk up, which I varnish and gunk. I don't know that that's true. A couple of guys said that it was a service bulletin that John Deere had sent around saying, disconnect or don't use the ventilator. I'm going to use the ventilator because that's the way this engine was designed. And some of you guys were also saying, is there no way to engage the oil pump to force oil up through the journals and the galleries of the engine block so that I don't have a dry start? I will not have a dry start, and I don't need to force oil through the engine. The reason I won't have a dry start is because I've used assembly lube. The assembly lube is used so that I do not have a dry start on the initial startup. Now, this is a diesel engine. I'm probably going to be cranking the ever-loving shit out of this thing until I get all the air out of the system before it'll fire up. And it will fire up. I have all the faith in the world that this engine's going to start up and run perfectly. That's just the way it is. So you see Timothy using gum cutter. The thing with gum cutter is it's really bad for you. It's not good stuff, but it works very well to remove old varnish and shit that's stuck to these oil pans and stuff. And you see Cody, he's running the wire brush over top of the oil pan gasket area, and it's going to work out pretty good. I do believe that I gave him some emery cloth to take off, and that's what he's doing. He's emery clothing it. What that does is it scuffs the surface of the mating metal, and when I put the Permatex in there, that'll make a really nice seal because I use the Permatex gasket sealer, and it works really good. And I have done these engines quite a bit and used them quite often. That type of a spray. But the key to engine building is actually cleanliness. Now, what you are about to see is a trick that I learned back, I want to say high school era, and I learned it from my high school shop teacher when we were working on the Ford 460 engine that they had in there. And I forget what in the hell we were using as a, what we were using this trick for. But anyways, I recently saw it on Chucky 2009's channel. He had that fellow that was working with him, I believe his name is Steve, and he was showing this trick, and I had to laugh about it because I thought I was going to be the one to show it, because this was filmed before Chucky had actually posted that video on removing a pilot bearing with grease. Now, they do make slide hammers to remove these bearings and other stuck gizmos that are solid. And if I was going to do this again, I would actually get the proper size dowel, wooden dowel, to actually use to force the bearing out with. So what you see me doing is actually filling the pilot bearing hole with grease. And then what I do is pretty simple. Just sit back and watch here while I'm doing this. So now what I've done is I've taken a socket that is approximately the size of the hole of the pilot bearing, and I'm going to smack it with a hammer. And what that does is it forces the grease has to go someplace. And the socket's going in, the grease, there's no room for the pilot bearing to come out or to stay in there. So the grease is actually pushing on the pilot bearing, causing the pilot bearing to come out of the hole as the socket is being forced in. So I put a little more grease in there to take up more of the space because some of the air came out. It is a messy process, but it's not a bad process. And you're gonna watch it. I'm kind of klutzy and clumsy here, but if you are having problems removing something that has dead space, you can't get on the back side of it because it's in, say, a crankshaft, camshaft, or anything like that, you just fill the hole. You just fill that hole with grease or oil. You can use oil if it's a flat surface and you need it to come straight up. Or you can go down to the tool counter and wait for the Snap-on guy to show up and buy yourself a slide hammer. And I'm not guaranteeing you that a slide hammer is going to work, because I've used slide hammers in the past and I've felt that it takes twice as long to use a slide hammer. And if you take a glimpse over my shoulder, you can actually see the shiny side of that bearing is coming out. And ready? Do I have it yet? Oh, I can't believe I'm blocking the Yep, there it is. It's in my hand. So there it is. The bearing has to go somewhere. So it can't stay in there with all that force of hydraulic pressure. When you hit it with a hammer, it has to go someplace. And so your socket's going in. I would use a wooden dowel if I was going to, if I had one. But if I was going to be showing this procedure professionally, like to a shop class or something, a wooden dowel will work quite well, or even a piece of round stock, because I believe it's a standard size. It looked like it was a three-quarter inch hole. It took a 7/16" socket to do it, and it takes, what else did I need to do to that thing? I had to put the come on, Wesley, think of this, what you need to say. I had to put the extension in the square hole so that the grease wouldn't just simply pop back out. So you put the extension in, and some of the sockets that you can use, like the one that I did use, well, you could take the extension and put it through the inside of the socket so it's backwards in there. And then when you hit it, it's a solid hydraulic amount of pressure. So that's how you remove a pilot bearing if you don't have a slide hammer, or if you never want to own a slide hammer. They're actually quite expensive, a slide hammer. So now I'm about ready to put the damn thing in. I'm going to put the new one in. I've got it there. And I'm looking for my rubber mallet, which I'm pretty certain that I have laying here someplace. I'm kind of confused and looking around. And then finally I just picked it up and boom, smack it in there. Grab the brass hammer. Brass punch, and tap it in on the sides till it's fully seated. And that's the end of that. Yeah. Now it's going to be get that engine block cleaned up enough to mate the oil pan to it. So now I'm putting some tools away. Yes, you saw me do it. I'm putting some tools away and clearing up the shop bench there so that I could definitely get the get that block put up on its edge, which you may or may not see me do here. I don't know. Now, let me take a look here in my editing software. No, I don't think you're going to see that. It's just going to be me cleaning and cleaning and oh, actually, I'm using the Permatex spray. It's a red spray. The block must have been ready to rock and roll. If I had to do this over again, I would put the rear main seal on first. I don't know if you're going to see me do that in the next video or not, but the rear main seal, there is a wear ring, and what you do is you take a blunt chisel, wide blunt chisel, and you smack that wear ring, and that will release it enough that it'll come off of there. And then you have to put because they're two-piece seals, you got the seal wear ring, or race, as you would call it. I would call it. You actually have to put the seal in the seal housing, and then as you put the seal onto the crankshaft, because you do not separate the seal from the wear ring, you actually tap the wear ring onto the crankshaft as you tighten up the bolts to the seal housing, or the end housing. I would do the housing first and then put the oil pan on, just for the simple reason that it was a little bit of a bitch to get it on there with the oil pan on. I did it backwards. Did it work? Yes, it worked actually quite well. I didn't have a problem. It was just a little more difficult because on the back of the engine block there's two guide dowel pins, steel dowel pins that guide the seal housing on. And what you have to worry about is actually pushing the bottom seal of the oil pan into the crankcase, and then it won't seal. So yeah, and that's just one of those things you do have to worry about. But it all worked out in the end. Everything worked okay. It just took a little more time than normal, obviously. When I did actually get the seal on, and you'll probably see that a little later in the series. I just have to apologize again for the noise of the heater. I know there's a lot of guys that are saying, hey, I'd really like to listen to what you were saying to Cody and Tim while you were working on this engine, and it just was drowned out by the heater. And right now it's probably cold again, so I'm just going to have to do the best that I can with this rebuild series. If you don't want to hear me talking, you can just turn the volume down and watch in this high speed. I guess that's about all I need to talk about. Oh, no. If you see that little can thing at the top that I just laid on top of the block, that is where the oil filter goes inside of the oil pan. It is like a press fit. It fits over top of an O-ring. And that O-ring is on the oil pump. The problem is... Oh, what did I just drop? The problem is the O-ring on the oil pump, it's not evident that it's there. And when I dropped that can in there, I realized, hey, that thing just kind of was sloppy. And that could very well be the reason why this engine failed, other than I had a broken ring. But it could be why the engine seized up. That O-ring was hardened, and it was dry. It was dried out. Not dried out, but it was hardened from heat, and it was allowing the oil or air to be sucked around that seal, not allowing the oil to go through the filter, and it was more than likely starving the engine for oil, or the bearings for oil, or at least the skirts of the pistons, and that could have caused the ring to crack and break, or even the seizure. So be careful if you're redoing these engines. Check your oil pump. There's a little O-ring on there. It's pretty good size. It's about 4 inches. You got to scrape it out of there, pull it out of there, and put a new one in before you reassemble it. And assembling these things, it's fun. I mean, I'm having a great time. I really am. I love doing this job. I love that, from time to time I do get my family members involved here, and Cody and Tim have been a great help. Maybe they're not in the videos the whole time that I'm filming them, but they are here. Cody's here from Friday till Sunday, sometimes Thursday afternoon till Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It works out. But when you're doing these things, you do have to change every single seal. And but anyways, thanks for watching. Oh, and this is how you put the lifters in, by the way.